There we're recording. Yay. We're going to finish up the neurotransmitters. That doesn't take particularly long, maybe about half the period. And then I'm going to introduce you to my, for lack of a better way to express it, my brain construct. And I'll send it. I'll send all the classes the picture. I did it up on the board. It's hard for me to do it because it takes a little bit. The class here doesn't vacate that fast, fortunately, most of the time. I'm like you guys who can't get out of here fast enough when I say we're done. It's okay. I don't take it the wrong way. I like you. Don't move on. No explanation. Okay. Nevertheless, here we are. In fact, I want to review. I don't have to review acetylcholine. We know so much about it, and you should, because there's several questions on the exam. Again, I urge everybody. So many students have run that thing through ChatGTP, that recording, that review recording. Someone just told me it looked really good when it came out. Make it like an NCLEX exam, that type of, because it's the same style of questioning. Please don't let, I don't have any problem doing it. I don't know how to do it. I don't have any problem with my students doing it. All I want you to do is get things right. It may shock you. I feel better when you do great. I feel like I've accomplished something. Lord knows it's taken its toll. It's all right. So the other one to remember, the catecholamines are important. They're basically excitatory. You will see shortly in the next part of the presentation, they're made in the midbrain, and they play a really pivotal role in a lot of areas. There's an additional area where we see them made, not the dopamine, but norepinephrine and epinephrine, as you'll learn, in endocrine, are made in the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland, as you will see, is really part of the sympathetic nervous system. We're actually going to get that in the very last chapters that we do on autonomic nervous system. Indolamines they're just named because of the chemical structure. They both come from serotonin, from tryptophan, histamine, from histidine. The difference is it depends on the receptors. They play different roles. Serotonin is going to help your blood clot, so it's not always a neurotransmitter. Serotonin is part of inflammation. It's not always a neurotransmitter. Histamine is the same deal. It's part of inflammation. It is part of allergies. It's part of anaphylactic shock, which is really allergies. And so it's immunologic. It's related to the immune system. So understand that if it's not acting between nerve to nerve or nerve to end communications, it's not technically a neurotransmitter. So, and all of these play a significant role in all of these things. I dislike the term mental illness. Okay. We'll get to the role that in the autonomic nervous system that norepinephrine and acetylcholine play. When we look at those, it's considerable. And maybe the term mental illness is such a garbage term. When I say a garbage term, very non-specific. We have people with psychiatric and psychological diagnosis. We have people with neurological conditions, both genetic and acquired conditions. So, I mean, mental illness is sort of I call it pejorative. That means it basically is implying that there's a significant defect. I was going to say, basically trying to use a politically correct term, nuts. Okay, and I don't like that because not everybody with mental illnesses, because a lot of times it's not of their own doing. That's just me. Amino acids, they're positive or negative. There's always some overlap. None of these are particularly pure. The amino acids, and these three, glutamate, aspartate, and glycine, are of the 20 that we use to make all of the things in our body. Glutamate is glutamic acid, aspartate is aspartic acid, glycine is glycine, GABA, and we always use the term gamma aminobutyric acid. I'm not sure of what it's probably taken from another amino acid, is my recollection. But this is not a cast in biochemistry. Nevertheless, glutamate and aspartate are fairly consistently excitatory. As you will see, glycine and GABA are very consistently inhibitory. They are the ones that are going to utilize what I talked about previously, those chloride gated channels. You're going to see that in the rest of the presentation this afternoon. It is afternoon. It's okay. Now we get to some unusual stuff. These are other chemicals that are used, categories of chemicals rather, that are used as neurotransmitters. Peptides, in this case, are typically 8, 9, 10 amino acid chains. You'll learn about them in endocrine when you talk about oxytocin and vasopressin, pitocin, which induces labor when it's made genetically. They are short chain polypeptides, relatively easy to make. Substance P, if you go back and look at the notes, and you don't have to, involves something called capsaicin. Capsaicin is a chemical that we extract from red peppers, hot red peppers, typically. And what happens is the capsaicin, if you might remember, we use for arthritis. Some people with success, I use it for a lot of pain over the years. You rub in, and what it does is it depletes this substance P, which is naturally occurring, and helps to promote pain signals. If we take it away, it's less painful. You might remember me saying about a third of the people it works, a third of people has no effect, and a third of people can't tolerate it because it makes their skin feel like it's on fire. My wife would have been in the last third. And so it's very unpredictable, and it's unusual. It's very interesting. It used to be by prescription, now it's available without. But the way it works is it takes away this neurotransmitter from pain fibers, which quote unquote makes things less painful. Endorphins are short for endogenous morphine-like substances. So all their different names there are naturally occurring opiates. And you probably did know, but you should know that when we talk about narcotic analgesics, that those are narcotic by definition are addictive agents that are produced by extracts of the poppy plant before the bud of the poppy plant, a paste, a liquid kind of comes out of there right before it flowers. Those pretty poppies, Dorothy on the Way, Red, Wizard of Oz, remember that? Poppies. Put her to sleep because they're like, that's some of the stuff they do. They reduce pain, put you to sleep. That's where they came up with the poppies. And when they mash that pulp that comes out and collects a sort of like a sap rather, and as they heat it, the first product that comes off, if you did not know, probably not, I'm interested in this stuff, is morphine. And what it does is they refine that. It's basically opium, and then that's refined into morphine. Morphine is the way painkillers are judged. Are they as effective, half as effective, twice as effective? And we've taken that morphine, and if you've heard of heroin, which is so addictive, and it's because they have chemically tinkered with it and made it more fat soluble. The faster it gets into your brain, the more addictive it is. Fentanyl, more addictive stuff. It's all about chemical tinkering with it for bad, not to make it more. Originally, it was probably done to make it more effective, but they found that it was more addictive. And I used to teach a course in drugs in the human body and a lot of emphasis on addictive diseases that were there. So that's really significant. We make it ourselves. They used to talk originally about the runner's high when running became popular in the late 60s, early 70s. When there was a boom of people starting to do recreational running and jogging. And it was like, oh, it's unbelievable. I feel so much better. And what happened, there was like a breakthrough where their bodies started to release this so they could run. If they were running a 5K, they could do a 10K. If they were doing a 10K, maybe they could do a half marathon, et cetera, that type of stuff. And was noticed, and then they began to identify these substances and found that they're all over. We have a lot of things in times of stress that we produce to overcome pain. You always hear those stories about somebody running into a burning building and, just somehow being able to go through what must be excruciating pain to rescue a child or to rescue a pet or whatever. Those kinds of things, incredible feats of strength. So a lot of it has to do with these. And they're not the only ones. These are peptides they call gut-brain peptides. There's a lot of signaling, and some of it relates to even the pleasure that we have when we eat, or something that gives us pleasure that we eat or drink, comes from some of these gut-brain peptides. And you explore the roles of somatostatin and cholecystokinin when you get to digestive physiology. That's probably in the last quarter of AP2. I'm doing digestive now with my anatomy class, and we do the anatomy, we do the physiology same time. When you folks are probably doing it in AP2. So it gives you some idea. They're important, and it's interesting to talk about it. And a lot of the roles are not, I would say, clearly understood. Would be the way to describe it. And lastly, I remember saying that it's like with that, like exercising. I mean, when I first actually went to a gym. I'm 55 years old, and there was a trainer. I was just trying to acquaint me with machines, and she's going, "It's like I can't do go after a while. You can't do a day without it." I mean, I was able to manage doing a day without it. I didn't get the addiction, but nevertheless, I understood where she was coming from. That was very useful to me when I was quitting smoking, for instance. The exercising really helped. So, nevertheless, purines. Now, you all know about purines because that was adenine and guanine when we talked about DNA and RNA. Adenine, when it's bonded to a ribose, is called adenosine. So, when I have one of my 4 or 5 cups of coffee in the morning, or whatever caffeinated beverage I'm drinking, basically what I'm doing is inhibiting what are called adenosine receptors. Adenosine is something that typically is an inhibitor. It allows you to sleep. It allows you to relax. If we don't allow those pathways and receptors to be triggered, what happens is effectively we awaken. There's lots of things that make us awake and alert. So, lights come on, loud sounds, that type of stuff. But what maintains it to a certain extent is is effectively blocking these adenosine receptors with certain things. There's a lot of caffeine in things that we intake that you may or may not be aware of. So, like if you're when you get older, like I am, a lot of times I don't sleep well anyway. But I stay away from caffeine, unless we're going out to dinner and having coffee afterwards. So I drink decaffeinated beverages like this. So moving on. Lastly, I think it's last. No, next to lastly are these. These are called gasotransmitters. They're gases. Believe it or not, we make these gases. These are toxic gases, not the nitric oxide. Carbon monoxide and hydrogen sulfide are things that come from fuel. They're auto exhaust. Hydrogen sulfide, most people relate it to that rotten egg smell that certain things have. Carbon monoxide is odorless and colorless and extraordinarily toxic. It's the way people do themselves in when they, turn the car on in the garage and the doors closed. Because it's colorless, odorless, and painless. It was also the first gas, if you like, very sad World War II history that the Nazis used to start exterminating people, basically my people, Jews. They did carbon monoxide trucks, just saying. So nitric oxide is not one of those, but these are gases that transmit different things. You're going to see later when we talk a little bit about these G protein things, it doesn't necessarily work fast. Okay. The nitric oxide is the most interesting because it plays such an important role with learning and memory and dealing with brain damage, all of those types of things. Nitric oxide, when I got my doctorate, we never heard of it. Nitrous oxide was laughing gas, the dentist would use. Nitric oxide was different. What we found out is that when a blood vessel is stretched, particularly a small one, it releases a chemical from its lining called nitric oxide. And it helps to make it easier to open up. So it allows blood to flow into particular areas. So you can equate that, or at least relate that, to these areas, because when you're learning and formation of memories, and particularly stroke repair internally, is creating new passageways, like nerve bypasses to nerves that are damaged and can't be repaired. So what happens is you need blood supply. Very important to me, because I think I told you, but the other class I had not, that my 8.5-year-old granddaughter suffered a stroke at birth. She has a cerebral palsy diagnosis. They did not think she would walk or talk. How severe it was. The damage was exceptionally large. I saw the MRI, and I struggled tremendously to try to express this to my eldest and to his wonderful wife. Long story short, she's in 2nd grade now. She's doing great. There's muscle damage. There's motor damage. She has contractures, and she can't get them. She doesn't have a lot of use of her right hand. She has to walk kind of cockeyed. Her left is immensely strong, and she's doing tremendously. I mean, really has. I mean, maybe she's a year behind Scholastic. It's miraculous is the only word. You remember we talked about cord blood. She actually had a cord blood infusion, maybe rather than a transfusion, a couple of years ago. Whether or not, it's hard to quantify whether that helped. But that nitric oxide, really an important chemical. You're going to hear a lot about it more. My colleague in biochemistry was just lecturing about it before. Interestingly, it's where it has made people the most money is basically is the framework of one of the highest selling pharmaceutical products of all time, from started about 30 years ago, called sildenafil. When you get pharmacology, you'll learn what sildenafil is. The trade name, that's the generic name, is called Viagra. And what Viagra does is it doesn't allow nitric oxide to be broken down, so it maintains dilated blood vessels. That's really what erections are all about. And that's why talk about a major windfall. Now, a lot of companies make it use different technology. They just use a different, but so basically it blocks the breakdown of nitric oxide. It's a lot of stuff that we're learning about here with these, whether it's a neurotransmitter or a gasotransmitter. If we want to prolong its effects, we don't let it be broken down. If we want to shorten its effects, we find a way to increase the breakdown. It's not rocket science, it's pharmaceutical science. It's not as complex as all that. And lastly, I think is endocannabinoids. Endo means you make them. If you did not know, we make marijuana-like, active ingredient of marijuana-like chemicals in our body. When marijuana was first identified and studied, and really came to the fore as early as the third, it was around for a long time before that, of course. But when we really started to be, there was a lot of input in this country, and viewed as like some horrible thing that was going, anybody who touched it was going to magically become an incurable drug addict. Something called Reefer Madness was a movie back in the 30s about that you may or may not have heard about. What happened was that this compound, it turns out, we make them. Tetrahydrocannabinol, which is THC, breaks down into a number of what we call active metabolites. They have lots of different roles. In the marijuana industry now, medical marijuana, or whether you need a medical one or you don't. Like in this case, this state you do, but not some states you don't. Basically what it does is they have different components. CBD, THC is more of that, the high kind of thing, and CBD has some of these things that we've known about for a long time. Marijuana enhances pain medicine, so it's a useful adjunct that actually makes it more efficient. This is all for people with cancer. It helps. They don't have much of an appetite from chemotherapy or radiation. It increases their appetite, and they are inevitably nauseous. This is all from the destruction of the gastrointestinal lining tract. And so everybody knew then that people were getting medical marijuana. It was viewed as an agent that had no redeemable features. It was a class 1 agent that meant it didn't have any value for medicine. And we found out over time, obviously, that it does. And so we, in science, became aware that we make it ourselves for various types of things. And again, learning and memory. And again, sometimes it'll be an appetite stimulant, really more control. Is more stimulant than not, and certainly an anti-nausea agent. So we've learned more about it and continue to learn about it. It is fat soluble. I tell you this the way I've told my own children, not that any of you are my children or anything, I don't mean to make it sound that way. Many of you are ending up in fields. Most jobs, I don't know what they're doing in the health industry, require a pre-job drug test. And understand that where things like amphetamines and cocaine have a very quick half-life, they're out of your system in a day or two. That's why you random test 2 or 3 times a week if people have a history and problems with that, and they're trying to stay along with a program or a legal program that's been told to them. Marijuana, 30 days in your system, in your hair longer. I mean, I don't know what you're going to end up doing, and it's not a value judgment. My own kids have to be very aware of that type of stuff. My middle son, my middle child, my younger with the two boys, is a commercial driver with a hazmat license. He works in that industry. Anytime he's screening for a new job, somebody rear-ended him when he was carrying explosives. He had nothing to do with it. The person wasn't paying attention. They were texting. Thankfully, nothing was damaged. They came from work and said, okay, we'll take care of it from here. Here's another car. So-and-so is going to drive you immediately to the hospital for a blood test to make sure you're not on something. He would never be on something, but do you get the idea? Starting now in your lives, this kind of stuff follows you around. Don't. Be careful. Licenses are very hard to get and very easy to lose. Stein's law and everybody's law. Neurotransmitters, a lot of things. This is the effects. This is just bringing it together. They can either excite or inhibit. Again, GABA and glycine, usually inhibitory. Glutamate, excitatory. Aspartate, excitatory. This is a big one for an oddball. Acetylcholine and norepinephrine, usually excitatory, but acetylcholine, as you'll find out when we do the autonomic nervous system, slows your heart rate down. Coming out of the vagus nerve, it produces acetylcholine. That's critical because your heart would normally, if your heart didn't have this, it would be racing. Heart rate without acetylcholine is over 100. That's not very healthy. The healthier you are, the better your heart is held under control. Normal heart rate in a healthy individual at rest between 60 and 80. All of us here should be there. The fact that you just ate something or maybe had coffee in the morning, okay, take that into account. And so direct action, the way it works the fastest is when it opens those ion channels. Acetylcholine and those amino acids I just talked about. Acetylcholine opens those sodium-potassium channels, neuromuscular junction. Amino acids, like I was telling you, open those chloride-gated channels, particularly glycine and GABA. They work fast. The other ones, the dopamine, the norepinephrine, those neuropeptides and gases, take longer to work but last longer. They work for these things called G protein pathways. You don't have to really, all you have to know is it's like a chain reaction. And so it can do a whole lot of different things. I'll show you that and I'll come back to neuromodulators. So these G protein guys, basically what happens, they link and it's like insulin, actually works this way. It can open ion channels, sure, but usually it activates kinase enzyme and there's a cascade of reactions. Phosphorylating channels, ATP, ADP, genes, transcription and translation, as well as opening those channels to let glucose come in. That's a G protein. It's like it follows it along this way. On the interior, basically like a chain reaction along the interior, and it releases something called the second messenger. You'll get chapter and verse on that in endocrine, I'm sure. That's where you see it in AP2. So I'll go back and finish this stuff that are there. So the difference here is neuromodulators. They're odd. Maybe that's like the serotonin I was telling you about. When we use one of those agents like Paxil or Prozac or Zoloft, basically you're allowing more of it to be there on the receptor. You can't trigger the receptor that much other than one time, but the continued usage modulates or alters it. So neuromodulators are basically influencing other factors. So synthesis, release, degradation, reuptake, sensitivity, postsynaptic, that's what I'm talking about. Receptors, even something that only works locally. It's kind of a neat way of saying there's way that some of these agents work, either that you come in contact with, or you are given to, or you make inside of you, that alter the signal rather than saying fire or don't fire. Fire, but only when you're ready. Don't fire unless you absolutely have to. That kind of thing. Right? We used to think that hallucinogenic drugs kind of did that because they altered reality. You had visual and auditory disturbances and things like that. They were used with a great deal of frequency in the 60s, I'm going to tell you, probably between 1964 and maybe 12 to 15 year period then. There was a lot of usage for that recreationally and also experimentally. Nowadays, you hear about it more when people go on. It's like a Steelers quarterback going into a cave. Basically, he's used a lot of those mind expanding agents that are there. That people feel are mind expanding. Whether or not they are is a matter of some debate. Those of us in college during my day and age used them recreationally. Don't all look at me. The statute of limitations has expired. You talk about going away on spring break. We didn't have to. Put up a poster. We're going. Don't have to move. Say plain fear. Don't smile. It's true. You wonder why it took me so long to get where I'm going. Okay. And that's everything you have to know or we're afraid to ask about neurotransmitters. And we're not doing anything else on that. None of that. And anything from here, starting with slide 63, ignore. Not doing it. Save it. Don't care. Doesn't make any sense to me either. My mind works differently. Now, I will send you this picture. It basically is a summary of this. I know you had some of this. This is really the next. I'm going to try to figure out, pick and choose what to include in this, which is chapter 12, which is the central nervous system. I know I'm going to do spinal cord. I'm trying to give you a construct of how the brain works. That's why I like this lecture. So I'll send everybody this picture. It's hard for me to display. And there's my bad handwriting. I don't know how to make it. Maybe I can make it lighter? I have no idea. I don't know how to use this stuff. So if anybody knows and holler out to me, I'm happy to do it. But nevertheless, this is kind of what happens. If you remember and go back to that other screen, we have coming from here, you have the highest order functioning area of the brain, the cerebral hemispheres. As we work our way down, my allergies, just a second. My ears clogged up. You work down to an area called the diencephalon, then the remaining part of the brain stem, and then the cerebellum, which is sort of separate and distinct. That's kind of what I show. It's from the highest order functioning down to the spinal cord, which is nothing more than a relay. There's no processing that goes on. At the highest area of the cerebral hemispheres, okay, that's where we have conscious thought. Where we have decisions to make, where we analyze data, where we react to inputs that we have and we form an answer. That's conscious control. Diencephalon is somewhat subconscious. Things are going on. It's impacted by our emotions. It's impacted by circumstances, but it's almost below our level of understanding and certainly a level of actual control. When you get to the brainstem, that's keeping your body in order. That's all. When we talk about the autonomic nervous system, that's where they're from. Autonomy, working by itself. So the autonomic nervous system, when it's damaged, that's when people die. People with tumors, people with damage, trauma, infections to the brainstem, very bad prognosis. Controls your heart rate, your breathing, your blood pressure, name it. That's where all those cranial nerves that you learned about, all but two of them come out of the brainstem. From top to bottom, or superior to inferior, midbrain pons, and medulla oblongata. The cerebellum's an interesting player in this. It's the second largest area of the brain, and it really is the one that has the most connections, the most synapses. Every day, we add more of those to that. And so that's the jump off point for me to be able, in the next roughly 20 minutes, to be able to give you my construct of the brain from this image. My bad handwriting. Really, the cerebral cortices, really, that's the gray matter, the cortexes. There are four of really consequence to us. There's a primitive one called the insula, INSULA, where very primitive impacts, my cursor doesn't work. Curses, up in the upper right. In that particular area, it's where smell and taste, they go deep inside. That's why smelling salts work. And things like they're relatively primitive. Lower order animals have those very, very developed. I mean, when I go to the kitchen and get something out of the fridge, my dog would be across the room asleep. The next thing I know, there's a nose next to me. He's got a very big nose. 75 pounds. He's entitled to a big nose. Okay. The four lobes to know a little something what they're about. The frontal lobe, it's the one that's everything. That's how you enact motor controls. That's how you think. That's how you communicate, how you form words. Everything, all the things we get from our other areas. General sensation of the body, Biol. Hearing and balance from the temporal lobe. And it has other functions, of course. Over half of your circuitry in the nervous system is dedicated to vision through the occipital lobe. All of that information is funneled forward. As you'll learn by different kinds of what are called association fibers, we'll get to that probably Wednesday. And what they do is they give you that information so the cognitive area you can respond to. There's areas that in a cognitive area we filter through emotion, we filter through what we observe, we have memory, we have knowledge, all interacting to form a response. And it's like taking a test. You see it. I think back that I studied this. I remember some of these terms. I don't remember the terms. All that information comes together, and you hopefully are able to find find the answer at the very least. Make sure you know what wrong answers are there and get them eliminated. That's how you succeed. That are there. So these are all important to know. A basic nugget about what they do. We typically how we respond, whether speaking or physical actions, are inherently motor. We move, we motivate. And so if I say, grab this, if I grab this the wrong way, I'm going to push it off the table. If I grab it like this, I can even lift it up. So like the gross motor movement, grab it, is filtered. Is it delicate? Is it hard? Is it heavy? Do I have to be careful with it? That's what the basal nuclei are about. Basal nuclei are for fine motor control. That's why we know that they are impacted significantly by Parkinson's and Parkinson's-like diseases. Someone with Parkinson's has difficulty starting, stopping, they jitter. It's a movement disorder. Tremors, sometimes almost impossible to move or to get it started. Very unable to control. Slow responses or overly rapid responses. So the filtration, or what we call fine motor control, comes from here. Interestingly, it's all about a neurotransmitter you just heard about called dopamine. Dopamine here, as you can see where it is in the upper, I'm explaining to people who are maybe listening to this online, in that upper right-hand corner are there. Why can't I open this up? There it is. Dopamine is up there. And coming, as you can see, the arrow from the midbrain, as you look at it on the left, where I'm pointing from the midbrain all the way up by the basal nuclei, is a pathway of increasing dopamine release that basically makes this part of the basal nuclei work properly. It's got a fancy name called the nigrostriatal dopamine pathway. You don't have to know that. But what that's been implicated is when there's not enough dopamine, and we basically give people dopamine to deal with it. A lot of things make this: trauma, infections, aging, genetic tendencies, medications frequently. A lot of side effects on those quote unquote mental illness stuff where we got all those medicines. A lot of the problems are movement disorders. It's very, very interesting. Here. Those are the high order functional things. Now, we get to the diencephalon, it's surrounded by an area called the limbic system. So this basically, it's your subconscious. And your subconscious is impacted a lot by emotion. How I don't know about you, when I'm all upset about something, I can't think straight. You coming into that test, the last thing you wanted to do is have a fight with your significant other, not feel good, be aggravated about something, you just heard something you didn't want to hear, right? So our ability to process information is impacted. The limbic system is part of that. It's like when I asked you about memory, and everybody kind of knew what the hippocampus was and about Alzheimer's. That's one of the systems that's involved in the limbic system. We'll go over it. But what's important about it is emotional control. For instance, that's where addictive diseases, of which unfortunately I am an authority of because I've had so many of them over the years. Thankfully, other than eating things I shouldn't eat, I'm over most of those. and the habit of telling bad jokes that nobody laughs at. 2 smiles. May I say to the rest of you, don't take this wrong way. There's another pathway. You're right. There's another pathway that goes from the midbrain all the way to that emotional center, to the limbic center for dopamine. And that's the one that's implicated in addictive diseases. That's their pleasure center. What makes something addictive is how good it makes you feel. The faster, if you want to pardon the English, the faster and the gooder, the more intense the satisfaction and the faster it gets to you. That's why they took morphine and made heroin, because it gets into your body faster and it gives you a euphoria. It feels good. That's why people are sticking those stupid needles in their arms since they figured out what the stuff did. It's been around forever, very long time. You Game of Thrones fan? Milk of the Poppy? No Game of Thrones fans here? Okay. God, stranger in a strange land. Moving on. The thalamus processes, sorts, edits your sensations. It sends them to the appropriate area of the brain. This is visual. Go there. Oh, tone that up a little bit. They won't be able to recognize it. Hearing. Okay, send that over there to the temporal lobe. That was a little noisy. Quiet it down. Oh, man, that burnt a lot. Better send that fast. So the person knows quickly to move their hand, even though that's more or less a reflex. That's there. That is the thalamus. It does a lot of processing, and indeed, it filters it through the window of emotion. The epithalamus is really a gland. It's part of your endocrine system. It's called the pineal gland. And that little pineal gland, okay, has a lot to do, we call body rhythms. So sleep is one of them. And so it makes melatonin. The rejoinder to this is sort of the watch out for is when melatonin, be careful if you have trouble sleeping one night and somebody said, try this melatonin, make sure you don't have something special to do the next day and you have to drive to get there. Because some people, the first time they take it, it really impacts. So you almost have to know what dose works for you. They're almost lethargic the next day. If you have to be somewhere, they might forget about that and not, you probably don't want to be operating machinery or driving a car. I'm not advocating against it. I have never taken it. My stepson, he used to teach here, always had trouble getting to sleep, and in fact found the right dose, took a melatonin. A lot of people do. A lot of people eat one of those gummies with the CBD in it every night. That's okay. As long as you can function the next day, you know what your dosage is. Hey, it's not for me. So you have to decide what's important to you. And the hypothalamus, which sits below them and attached to the hypothalamus, which is part of the brain, there's a little stalk, and on that stalk is the pituitary gland. This is the link between the nerve and the endocrine system. Really important, because it's like when that idiot cuts you off in the car and you make that fast, that's the nervous system. When that happens, all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I could have gotten killed. We all could have been hurt. You're driving, you're a passenger, and you feel your heart racing and you're breathing and your blood pressure's way up. That's your endocrine system. Nervous system got you out of it, rapid. But there's a certain, whether it's a minute or two or for a few minutes or longer or less, that's your endocrine system. And this is the link between them, is that area. That's where the blood-brain barrier is weakest. What happens there? How do you know when we need to eat something? Basically, it's monitoring chemicals. Am I thirsty? Am I hungry? Is my sugar level low? Is my sugar level high? All that. Do I need hydration? Do I not need hydration? All of that, because that's the one place where your circulation can impact the brain. As we move down, we have basically the brain stem in order. Midbrain already, biggest role making catecholamines. It's a structure that hasn't changed a lot since its growth and development. It's one of the few areas that doesn't change nearly as dramatically. So it's sort of consistent throughout, and it makes those catecholamines that are there. It has other things that are part of the midbrain, as you'll see when I take a quick look at the anatomy over the next. So we'll do it next week. We'll do it Wednesday and Friday. And then when we come back, it's all, I'll make sure I get everything done or send you supplemental lectures about it. And we'll go from there. And then we'll do the autonomic nervous system with a week after Thanksgiving. And so the pons and the medulla are really all about these things. That's where all the centers that control breathing, circulation, heart, keeping the internal organs in order, all of that we have absolutely no control over. And then when you finally get all the way down where it's not, doesn't even have any processing or really have the control centers, we have the spinal cord. And the reason I put those arrows up and down is really sending signals out and bringing signals back in. It's not modifying them per se. The oddball is kind of over here. And that's here. The cerebellum. The cerebellum, okay, is the second largest area of your brain. That is the area where the cerebral cortex, it's the only other area other than the cerebral lobes that have cortices, have gray matter on the outside, high order function. That's the area you're constantly feeding information to. Every time you do something, when I say class is over, all of you are going to basically do the same thing. You're not going to think about it. You're going to close up whatever media you're using, whatever you're writing, handwriting, computers, tablets, whatever. You're going to get up and you're going to leave. You're not going to think, I have to put this cover down. I have to take it and put it in my backpack. And I have to put pressure here and get up here. You're not going to think that. You're going to get up and go, right? I want to walk over here. I'm not thinking I got to lift the left, right, right. Stabilize here. No. That's the cerebellum. Cerebellum is responsible, it's a fancy term. It's called ipsilateral. Ipsi means same side. For instance, contralateral, which most of the way the body works, is right side of my brain says, move my left arm. Left side of the brain, my right arm. Ipsilateral motor coordination means that when I wanted to lift, I didn't have to think about what I had to do to lift this leg because I knew what muscles I had to use to accomplish this. I had to flex here, I had to bend here, I had to create pressure here, I had to stabilize over here, etc. It's like muscle memory. And a lot of this information, and it constantly shuttles information up toward the brain, toward the cerebral cortex, down toward the spinal cord, across to these other areas. It's interlinked. You have more synapses, more information processing there than any other area. It's a very interesting area. And basically, it's involved in something called, it's the last real thing we have time to discuss today, called Romberg's sign. And Romberg's sign is basically you need your cerebellum, your eyes, and what's called proprioceptors in order to be able to kind of get where you're going, as long as you have two of the three. Normally, you and I, we have them all. Proprioceptors. The other classes didn't know what they were. I was a little surprised. Special sensors. If I say, everybody, close your eyes now and tell me where your arms are, everybody would know where their arms are. You notice yours down here texting, yours up by your nose, yours up by your nose, etc. 3 by the nose. 4. So we have number 5. That auction. But you would know that. A proprioceptor is a tiny sensor in every part of your body that tells you where it is in space, time and space and place. Okay? If I had you close your eyes, those proprioceptors and the function of the cerebellum, I had you close your eyes, and I said, grab your wrist, then grab your wrist, grab your other wrist. Right? And I didn't even have to practice it. Nobody laughed. Why is that significant? It's why you can close your eyes and walk this way. I can close my eyes and walk this way. I can turn around. I'm not dizzy. I'm not falling over. Right? If you ever see someone with diabetic peripheral neuropathy, very, very common, they lose the sensors, the proprioceptors in their feet. They have to watch. In order to be able to do that. It's very similar. Sometimes that affects, there's an old disease that's still around called syphilis. It affects what's called the posterior columns. We'll get to that in spinal cord. We talk about it a little bit in micro. Basically, same thing. It's not so much about the cerebellum, it's about the signal getting up to the cerebellum. So why is this important? We use Romberg sign, and hopefully none of you have had this experience, having to close your eyes and touch your fingers to your nose. When does that happen? You could have a concussion. That's an excellent answer. You are innocent. You're okay. That's also for the field of sobriety test, which I know nothing about. At least today. You have no concussions to go. And that's part of the concussion protocol. Excellent. The cop gets you out of the car and says, "You ever drink?" Oh, I haven't. Well, walk this line, close your eye, and they're like, touch your finger to your nose, grab it. And they fall over laughing because they grab your shoulder. Or they grab your chin. You've lost two of the three. You close your eyes, alcohol affects the cerebellum. Concussion affects the cerebellum. Okay? And when that happens, big problems. That's called Romberg sign. It's really important. That's definitely a question on the final exam. Okay? That's where we are with this. So I'll send you my snapshot. I really should have somebody neat handwriting do it, not some dummy like me. This is, and we'll do that and be completed here. When we come back after the exam, we'll start over here. And I'm not going to go crazy with this stuff, but I do want to show you particularly these ventricles that are so important, where the cerebrospinal fluid is, and a few other things, and we'll get moving. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend.